Hello and welcome back. Today we're reacting to some more Kurzgesagt. Today we're going to be asking the big questions like, is reality real? Today we're going to talk about the simulation argument. Let's dive right in.
We humans are unable to experience the true nature of the universe unfiltered. Our senses and brains can only process a fraction of the world. So we have to use concepts and tools to learn about the true nature of reality.
It's very true. There's a lot of senses out there that we observe in other animals and other creatures that we don't have, right? So there's whole ways to experience the universe that we can't even fathom because we just don't have that in our evolutionary tree. It's not something we evolved. The first one that pops to mind is the ability to sense magnetic poles that a lot of birds have that help them migrate.
Technological progress not only widened our knowledge about the universe, it also made us aware of unsettling possibilities. In the future, it might become possible to simulate entire universes. But if this is an option, how can we know that it's not already happened? What if we are not creators, but creations?
That's true.
Is it possible that we are not real and we don't even know it?
This is a good argument, the simulation argument, and it has a lot of great logical points. It's something that I'm actually decently familiar about. But one of the big counterpoints that I would like to point out before we get into any of the details is I don't believe we're living in a simulation. I think that's actually quite unlikely. One of the biggest arguments that they bring up about simulation is if it's possible to simulate a universe, to simulate beings within that universe, if that's something that has occurred, then the chances are high that the amount of simulated universes actually is more than the non-simulated, right? Because there's only one true as far as we know. But my counterpoint to that is when you're talking about science, when you're talking about logic, when you're talking about any complex system, oftentimes the simplest solution is the correct one because nature does not like to try too hard. It does sometimes, right? But usually it takes the easiest path to get to bring the means to an end. So I don't think that simulation, I don't think we're in a simulation. It's much easier to explain that we are in the reality that we observe than it is to come up with this extremely complicated solution that we don't even know is possible. That's my belief anyway. Dun, dun, dun.
If our current understanding of physics is correct, then it's impossible to simulate the whole universe with its trillions and trillions of things.
True.
But we don't actually need to anyway.
No.
We only need enough universe to fool the inhabitants of our simulation into thinking that they're real.
Sort of like in video
Who needs
games.
billions of galaxies? We only need the space our subjects are allowed to explore.
Yeah, the video games only render what you can see and a little bit past that in case you change perspectives quickly, right? A lot of video games employ that tactic. So it would make sense that if you were simulating something of the scale of the universe, that you would only simulate what you need to. Maybe a tiny bit more on that to account for quickly changing perspectives. But you would also want to make the simulation efficient, right?
The vast universe could just be a flat projection, and they would have no way to know.
It's Jake. Jake, I think.
What about small things like cells or bacteria?
From
We don't really
Vsauce,
need
one of
them.
them.
When you use a microscope, what you see could be instantly created. Same with atoms. The chair you're sitting on right now does not need to be simulated with quadrillions of atoms. We just need the outermost layer of it. It might be empty inside until you decide to break it open.
When you think about the sheer amount of information in the universe, it is absolutely, astonishingly, mind-bogglingly, insanely crazy how much data, just raw data, the universe has. I mean, just in the tiniest little, look at your fingernail. How many trillions and trillions of atoms are in your fingernail? How many fluctuations in quantum fields are happening throughout the surface area of your fingernail? It's
Your body might feel like it's filled with bubbly things, but it might be empty until you open it. The minimum requirement for our simulation is only the consciousness of our virtual humans. Our subjects just need to think the simulation is real. Okay,
And maybe there's just
so
one.
Are we being simulated? Well,
How do you prove everyone else is
there
real?
are a few conditions that need to be met. Obviously, we have no authority over this topic, so please take everything we say with a grain of salt. Based on a modified version of the original simulation argument by Nick Bostrom, we have 5 assumptions for you. If they're true, you, dear viewer, are living in a simulation.
Let's hear 'em.
Assumption 1. It's possible to simulate consciousness.
I do believe that one day we will be able to simulate consciousness. I think we need to do a better job at defining and agreeing on a definition of exactly what consciousness is. But I think that we will get there, because today we can already build neural networks electronically, right? We can already do that. So if we sink enough computing power into it and enough theory, I think that we would eventually land upon consciousness, even though it might be a little bit different than what we experience as consciousness. So I think that definition is very important, but I think we will get there.
Nobody knows what consciousness is. For the sake of argument, let's assume that you could generate consciousness by simulating a brain. Brains are pretty complex.
I think they're the most complex things that we know about, aren't they?
If you count every interaction between synapses as one operation, your brain runs at about 10 to the power of 17, or 100 million billion operations per second.
That's
Let's
insane.
generously assume we need 10 to the power of 20 operations to simulate 1 second of human consciousness. But we don't want to simulate just one human, we want to simulate all of human history at once so we can skip around. Let's say we want to simulate 200 billion humans with an average lifespan of 50 years. 1 year has 30 million seconds, times 50 years, times 200 billion humans, times 10 to the power of 20
That's a lot.
operations.
So we need a computer able to handle a million, trillion operations.
I'm quite curious if you were to take the operations per second of a modern day supercomputer and calculate out how long this many operations would be to carry out, what that is. Obviously, it's going to be some crazy big number, but I mean, with some simple math, as long as you knew how many operations per second they could do, we should be able to figure that out, right? Of course, it's all very hypothetical, but it'd be really interesting to see.
Per second.
Anyone want to do some math for some extra credit?
More operations than there are stars in the observable universe.
Wow.
A computer like this is just impossible. Except maybe it isn't.
Jupiter brain.
Assumption 2. Technological progress will not stop anytime soon.
I think that's a safe assumption, but that assumption rides on several other assumptions, unfortunately. So assumption 1, or sub-assumption 1, I guess, is we won't destroy ourselves in the near future. Assumption number 2 is that the technological progress is possible economically, right? So there's the technical feasibility of it. I don't think we're anywhere near where we can go. I think that we've still got a lot to learn about this universe and how it works, and meaning also that we have a lot more improvement to do upon our current technologies and discovering new ones. But is that improvement feasible economically? Because you're not going to sink millions or billions of dollars into developing a technology that there's not a demand for. So at some point, I think that the economic part of it will be the limiting factor over the technological feasibility. That's my presumption. I don't think that's going to happen within our lifetimes. I think that's a long-term goal, or a long-term problem, rather. But I do think that's going to be the limiting factor is economics.
If we assume that technological progress continues in a similar fashion as it has so far, then there might be galaxy-spanning civilizations with unlimited computer power at some point. Beings on a technology level so advanced that we could barely distinguish them from gods.
It's
A
true.
computer that can handle a million, trillion operations is serious business, but there are actually concepts for computers which could handle this. The Matryoshka brain is a theoretical megastructure made up of billions of parts orbiting a star feeding on its radiation. A computer of this scale would have enough power to simulate many thousands, if not millions, of humanities at the same time.
Can you imagine a computing system that takes an entire star to power it? Might actually be able to run a full high-def texture pack in Minecraft on that one. Wow.
Other technologies, like high-end future quantum computers, might lower the size drastically, so it might be possible to do this with a structure the size of a large city, or even smaller. But only if there's still someone around to build the computer.
Yeah.
Assumption 3.
The important one.
Advanced civilizations don't destroy themselves.
And we touched base on that already, right? So that's the one of the sub-assumptions of the previous assumption, is that we don't destroy ourselves. We have to stick around in order to get advanced, right? We got to grow. We've got to improve. We have to overcome this greed thing that we've had beaten into us by evolution. We got to get past that. We're not at a point in history where that greed is necessary to survive. We're past the survival fight if we want to be.
If there is a point at which all civilizations destroy themselves, this whole discussion ends here. Looking into space, you'd expect a universe filled with millions of alien civilizations, but we see nobody.
And you know, the sad part is all the potential that humanity has. We have great and wonderful potential, right? We might not be a type 3 super civilization, or a type 2, or not even quite a type 1. But you know what? I think if we play our cards right, based on what we've accomplished so far, and what we've proven and theorized that we can accomplish, we can harness the energy of our planet. I think that's possible. We're almost there. We can harvest the power of our solar system. I think without a doubt, as long as we stick around, that will happen. All of our destructive capabilities and capacity, all it takes is the right person out of a handful of people, just the right person to have that one bad moment of judgment, or to have that one bad day, or to make that one mistake, or to maybe slowly go into derangement or go insane and authorize something that shouldn't be authorized. We're talking nuclear weapons. All it takes is that one person, and humanity might not be destroyed entirely, but we'd be sent back to the Stone Ages. There's a quote, and I don't know who to attribute it to, unfortunately, but the quote is, World War III will be fought with nuclear weapons. The next world war, the next war will be fought with sticks. It's going to send us back to the Stone Ages if that happens, at the very least, if we're lucky enough to survive, which we're pretty resilient. I think the species will survive, but civilization will not.
The reason for this might be great filters. Great filters are barriers life has to overcome, like nuclear war, asteroids, climate change, or a black hole generator. If life is inherently self-destructive, then there are no simulations. We explain this in more detail in our Fermi Paradox video.
That was a good video. We checked that one out.
Assumption 4. Super advanced civilizations want to run simulations.
So obviously a civilization that's capable of doing a simulation on this scale is going to be pretty unrecognizable from modern humans, right? So they're going to have a lot of different wants and needs and dreams and aspirations, and we can't presume to understand their intentions. Think of us in 100,000 years. It's going to be a lot different. So yeah, do they want to run simulations? That's a really good question, and we don't really have a good answer for that, I don't feel.
When we speak of posthuman civilizations, we don't know what we're dealing with. To think we know what beings as powerful as gods want is pretty arrogant.
Yeah.
Imagine the smartest ant on Earth living next to an amusement park. It's curious about what humans are up to, so you try to explain. Unfortunately, the ant just doesn't understand. The concept of roller coasters and standing in lines and holidays and fun doesn't make sense to an ant living an ant life.
Yeah.
It's the same with us and a post-human being. Compared to them, we are ants. running simulations for fun or science might be an absurdly stupid idea to them. But if they do want to run simulations for whatever reasons, and assumptions 1 to 3 are true too, then the chances are not zero that you are living inside a simulation. Assumption 5. If there are a lot of simulations, you are probably inside a simulation.
And this is the assumption that I have a problem with personally. Because, you know, simulated people could outnumber normal people. But that's based on 5 assumptions that we just talked about. It's not fact. It's taking a lot of leeway in us coming to that conclusion. I think that the most plausible explanation, that is the most likely, unless maybe we can prove some of these assumptions correct, is that we are actually living in reality, or in a reality. Not a simulated reality, but an actual one.
If there are simulated civilizations, it's likely that there are a lot of them. After all, we assume that post-human beings have access to practically unlimited computing power. So if they run simulations, it would be convenient to run millions or even billions of them.
Heck, they might sell Universe Sim as a game. Build your own universe. Construct your own advanced civilization from the ground up. Fast forward time so you don't have to wait around and get bored as they evolve. We could be the precursor to the actual gameplay that's just like a simple loading screen. We have no idea.
If there are billions of simulated universes, there are probably trillions and trillions of simulated conscious beings, which would mean that the vast majority of all conscious beings that will ever have existed are simulated. So for every conscious being made of flesh, a billion simulated ones exist.
The argument makes sense. Don't get me wrong. It absolutely makes sense. But like I was saying, because it's based on so many assumptions, whereas the fact, or in this, I guess we'll call it an assumption, that we're actually real, that's based on lifetimes and lifetimes of scientific research, experiments, observations. It's not based on a lot of assumptions. We have a lot to back that up, including our own experiences. Now, it's definitely a non-zero chance that we're simulated. Unless we can prove it a little bit more, I'm definitely hard lean towards we're not simulated.
Since we have no way of knowing if we are simulated or not, in this case, the chances of you being one of the 999,999,999 simulated ones are pretty high. So what you consider reality might not be real at all. You really might be simulated.
All of this is based on a lot of assumptions that we can't really test right now. So many scientists disagree with this whole thought experiment.
Glad to know I'm not
don't burn
alone.
your house down to test if there will be glitches. If you are simulated, not that much changes for you.
Yeah.
You might be on a small planet speeding through eternal nothingness, or a simulation inside a computer. Your existence does not become more or less scary and bizarre. All we can hope to do is try to live good lives and have a good time. And hope that if we actually are simulations in a supercomputer, nobody trips over the power cable.
I like that. And that's a really good point. I'm actually really glad that they brought that up as sort of the finishing note. Even if it is true, even if we are in a simulation, all of us, and we always have been, what does that change? Some people might view that as sort of an existential crisis. It doesn't change anything for us, though. I mean, you're always you. This world, this universe that we observe, whether it's actual or simulated, it's everything we know and everything we are. Whether it's actuality or simulation, that doesn't really change at the end of the day. It's a really cool thought experiment, but it's nothing to get depressed about. It's nothing to dwell on. It's nothing to change your life over. Live your life. Your life is the same, and your life is still unique and valuable regardless of the outcome of this topic. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.